That is very beneficial to reflect on those statements, those thinking patterns. Write them down in the moment right there and say, is this really how you are? As Steve Jobs said in his commencement speech, and this has been very influential for me over the years when it comes to identifying these thinking patterns and letting them go, which are not true to who I am. Follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you want to become. Have the courage to follow your inner voice. Your inner voice reveals how you truly are. So these associations that we have to relationships, personal life, business life, we can question them. At the end of the day, we are the only suggester. I can suggest anything to you. The reality is you could either accept the suggestion or you could reject the suggestion. It's totally up to you. And I would encourage really going in within yourself and evaluating the different thought processes or communications you have with others, verbal and nonverbal, to reveal the thinking patterns and saying, well, I may have been identifying with these thinking patterns in regards. However, I don't have to identify with these thinking patterns anymore. Suggestion of habit, he says. The suggestion of habit. This form of suggestion is closely allied to the preceding phase, suggestion of association. In fact, some consider it to be merely a branch of the latter. But we feel that there is a decided difference in the operation of the two phases, and accordingly prefer to treat this one as forming a separate and distinctive phase. Of course, all habit is an association with something in the past, but suggestion of habit may arise from an original cause of suggestion of authority, suggestion of association, suggestion of repetition, suggestion of imitation, or else from an original decision of the intellect resulting from correct reasoning. The former act or thought acts as a suggestive outside influence, although it belongs to one's own mentality. So, we go into the state of mind that is ideal by going about our day-to-day life. And if we maintain our flow or ideal state of mind, what we notice is that our conversations, our behaviors, how we relate to others, how they relate to us, is congruent, authentic, fun, and exactly how we truly want to be. And if for whatever the reason we get out of that state of mind, we simply reflect back and say, what was the thinking pattern in relation to whatever happened, what a person said, life experience, this and that, because it's sourced from within. That seems to bring us into a different state of mind. Pause for a moment, write it down. When you saw the person that you were interested in, doing the business deal with, what did you think? That they weren't going to accept you? The reality is that that's the theater that we're looking to play out, unconsciously so, if we identify with, which is not in the state of mind of how we truly aspire to be. When we are in the ideal state of mind, the people automatically show up. We find ourselves automatically doing things. We find ourselves trying less and being more. This is the key distinction. Being. I am this way. This is who I truly am. The behaviors express. The communication expresses. Nonverbal, verbal expresses automatically. You know what to say, when to say, how to say, why to say, without even questioning it. It happens automatically. And as we maintain that state, it appears that reality changes to reflect with all its precision the end result, the vision of how we see ourselves to be accurately, fully, at the destination in our imagination through what we would call, in our Neville Goddard discussions, the bridge of incidence. The person all of a sudden starts communicating congruently. Their body language is more congruent. Their voice tonality is more congruent. They find themselves communicating using words in certain sequences that articulate the point with a higher degree of vivid accuracy in relationship with others. They find themselves automatically expressing. You know, we have that saying, hindsight is 20/20, as in a person goes through an experience in conversation, and they say, I didn't say the ideal thing. If only I said this during that time. What they will notice is far less of those occurrences because they'll find they'll automatically say it. We can say this person has a quick wit. They know what to say, quick response. Where's this coming from? It's coming from the state of mind. And as a person maintains that state of mind, they'll see more of this every day. I've noticed this with myself. I've noticed this with working with others. All we do with myself and others is get into the flow and maintain the flow. Get into the ideal state of mind, whatever way you got to do it. Talk to yourself, dance, go for a run, meditate, whatever. you know the things. Actually, I recommend creating a list, an inventory of all the different ways you can get into the state of mind so that you find yourself not only congruent, but also in relation to suggestion of association, habit, authority. Your own thinking patterns will be true and accurate to whatever five sensory experience, and you will interpret it as accurate in relation to the vision. And you won't find yourself being swayed. So I've had this experience in my past. It seemed that other people were swaying my opinion. The reality was my own thinking patterns in relation to what they were saying, in which I was creating that illusion, and in actuality I was swaying myself. Now that's okay if I was doing it. No need to shame or condemn myself. Practice this more so. So then we have suggestion of repetition. He says, the suggestion of repetition. This form of suggestion may seem to be very much akin to the preceding phase, suggestion of habit. But there is a marked distinction and difference. Suggestion of habit has its power imparted to it by the habitual repetition of the act or thought on the part of the individual. It's the constant dripping of water wearing away the stone. The suggestion which passes you without much attention or consideration when first made will gain both attention and consideration from you if it be repeated sufficiently often and in the right manner, which is why I recommend repetition of the same information and repetition of the same information from different perspectives, which includes information that a person consumes, conversations, environments that encourage how you truly want to be. Because through this repetition, it forms the self-image, and then that self-image, which is one with that ideal state of mind, causes the person automatically to communicate in a way that's suggestive in terms of relationship, verbal and nonverbal. And when I'm talking about nonverbal, I'm talking about authentically expressing on how you carry yourself, how you dress, how you live. It's authentic to you. And maybe a third party might look at that and say, well, it's because this person dresses this way. It's because this person drives that car. When in actuality, when we go deeper into it, we recognize that those are authentic, automatic expressions of the state of mind that's ideal to how a person truly is. And what we want to discover is that person's psychology. As I have mentioned this many times, one of my favorite things to do when I connect with people, and they would have the expressions of prosperity in their life in whatever shape or form, business, relationships, etc., is I want to understand their psychology. I want to know how they think. I want to know how they see reality. I want to know their paradigm. Because they will say things, they will communicate about things in a certain way. And they would say such distinct, unique things. And I'll say, you know what, that's interesting. What if I started to think like that? For example, one of the thinking patterns that I adopted back in the days was, there are more people like me than I could possibly ever meet. Now, I heard this from an individual that was living that way. And they were growing rapidly in their life, and everywhere they went, whatever stage of the journey that they were in, they always were surrounded by people that were reflective of where they were in that journey. And I said, that's a beautiful way of being. Because if I don't see it that way, then what else am I imagining? That as I continue to grow, I'll feel isolated? I love being around people. And I love being around people that I can further encourage what they truly desire, and they also encourage what I truly desire. And it's a great time. I have a lot of fun. So I kept encouraging that thinking pattern. Now, there are many of these thinking patterns that are distinct, because what we find is a lot of times these individuals who think these kinds of ways didn't have the desire to write books or talk about this information. But we will find it in their communication, in what they say about how they communicate in regards to themselves, in what they say when they communicate about others. And like paint and paint brushes, that's what's creating reality. Then we got suggestion of imitation. He says, the suggestion of imitation. This form of suggestion, while being in itself a distinct phase of suggestion, nevertheless has a close relationship with the several other forms of suggestion. In the acceptance of suggestion of authority, there is to be found an unconscious imitation of the mental attitude of the person asserting the authority. In suggestion of association, there is an imitation of the associated thing. And in suggestion of repetition, there is to be found evidences of imitation. Examples are found in schools of philosophy, theories, thought, and religion. See, we're at a stage right now where anywhere we go, we want to recognize that we are the only suggester. And in regards to what you hear anyone say, any information, you have the ability to accept it or let it go. You can say, I resonate with this, I identify with this, or not. I believe we're already aware like this. Only we might not have been recognizing to what degree we have been suggesting to ourselves. And my goal all throughout these videos, as I've been working with this with myself and others, because what do we really do in consulting? A person shows up. Yes, I've got the business experience from my IT business, consulting, working with different companies, etc. Most of this has to do with their thinking. The reality is that nowadays, more so than ever before, the business techniques, strategies, and whatever is available today for free on YouTube, on Instagram, all over the place. I see it. Wasn't the case back in the days, but it is the case now. And with all this information available, and this is true not just for business, but personal life, living any kind of life that a person wants, why is it that they have a hard time integrating this information? Well, it's their thinking patterns in relation to the information. So when we talk about relationships, now we see so many different kinds of relationships. A person just says, this is the kind of relationship that I want. They can be inspired by others, or they can go within themselves and say, what do I really want? And discover. And if any doubts, indecision, inaccurate thinking patterns, beliefs are brought to the surface, then that's an opportunity to let them go, because that's not who we are. We let those thinking patterns go. And then as we go through life, if any information seems to play out as theater, or we come across some information and we're interpreting it from the perspective of we can't have what we want, recognize right then and there in that moment that that's what we're suggesting to ourselves, and we don't have to suggest that anymore. If a person wants to suggest it, they certainly can. But if they don't want to, they don't have to suggest it. And this is why I'm an advocate for autosuggestion, as in create your own statements of intent, inner conversations, dialogues, write them down, record them to yourself, read them regularly, say them to yourself, or vary it in different shapes or form in different conversations with yourself and others. And recognize that as you identify with those thinking patterns, you see them expressed more so every day. Reality is the affirmation in mind. And so I had learned this from Think and Grow Rich. There was a whole chapter dedicated to autosuggestion. It was a wonderful thing. And when I came across it, I'm like, wow, this is a gold mine. You mean you could actually write a bunch of statements out, and you could say it to yourself, you can suggest it to yourself, and you'll become those statements? You mean I can create whatever statements I want? Well, upon reflection, when we look back at our lives in relation to suggestion of imitation, repetition, habit, association, and authority, we'll recognize, where did we get these thinking patterns from anyways? We were the ones suggesting them to ourselves, although we were unconsciously suggesting to ourselves. Well, upon reflection, this was happening all throughout our lives. Only now, and I further encourage it, a person is to a higher degree understanding of what they're suggesting to themselves. So either you allow certain suggestions to go in which you blindly allow them to go in and mold you to be someone that you're not, or maybe some of them will mold you to be who you are, and that's a hit and miss strategy to me. I'd rather accurately, clearly define how I am, how I truly am based on my intuition, and encourage the autosuggestions, conversations accordingly. Certainly at the end of these videos, I give autosuggestions, which I have integrated and further integrate, which has played out in my relationships, in my business, in the different areas of my life. And so he says, the phenomena of suggestion and that of autosuggestion can also blend into each other in subtle degrees. So in suggestion, as in you receive outside suggestion, recognize that you are still the suggester in relation to those suggestions. So if I suggest anything to you, a book suggests anything to you, anyone suggests anything to you, you have the ability to accept or reject that suggestion. You have the ability to consciously do it. You have a relationship to that suggestion in which you are authoritative or transcendent to that suggestion. And then we apply our distinct autosuggestions of how we truly see ourselves to be. And so he says, the phenomena of suggestion and that of autosuggestion can blend into each other in subtle degrees. For instance, one may receive an impression from outside, an impression which is the effect of a suggestion from outside, and being impressed by it, they may think about it over and think and feel about it, so that the idea takes a firm hold upon them. Up to this point, it is a suggestion in its general phase, but then the suggestion is repeated to themselves, both in self-communication and in conversation with others, until an impression is made much deeper, than that caused by the original impression. This secondary effect is autosuggestion, of course. So let's bring this all the way back to the beginning here. What we're looking to do is maintain the congruence of who we truly are as a result of letting go of thinking patterns that are not how we are by doing this subconscious mind work, which is a lot of fun. So I don't even call it subconscious mind work, because I love further revealing these thinking patterns and letting them go. Letting them go. No shame, no judgment, no condemnation. Let them go. Why? Because then I discover the true and accurate thinking patterns in relation to how I am, and I get to live how I truly want to live. Increasingly more so every day. And then in regards to friendships, relationships, business partners, clients, etc., people show up revealing with accuracy, more so every day, what we say in communication, verbal and non-verbal communication, and they genuinely want to be there. We genuinely want to be there. And we can call that harmonious relationship. And this is all by suggesting to ourselves everything we're talking about here. So we become, and it reflects. We become inside, or we be inside, and the relationships reflect automatically. No trying, no looking for, no needing, reflects automatically. Be, reflect. Be, reflect. He says, they think that their effects are produced by suggestion alone, and forget the mental state behind the suggestion, which is the real motive force. So again, be, reflect. And to emphasize, he says, why is it that two individuals using the same words of suggestion upon the same subject produce varying degrees of effect? Well, we could say one individual, be, reflect. The other individual, trying, and reflection, unnecessary conflict in relationship, etc. He says it is because the mental states or dynamic mentation of the two individuals vary in quality and degree. The suggestionist thinks they're merely directing their suggestion by words toward the subject, but all the time they are pouring out a current of mentative energy. True authenticity, there's no faking. More so every day I identify certain thinking patterns as I go about my day-to-day journey, and I have fun doing it. I don't stress myself out doing it. I let go of those thinking patterns, I become more of who I am, and it reflects. And so he says the suggestionist thinks that they're merely directing their suggestions by words towards the subject, but all the time they are pouring out the current of mentative energy, which rapidly induces the desired mental state in the subject. Now here's the beautiful thing. That other person genuinely wants to be there, and you genuinely want to be there. That's why I say what you imagine imagines you back. So I have a conversation with them, and they give me their reasons of why they genuinely want to be there. Because this is done from a place of truth, love, authenticity. Authenticity, love is who we truly are. And he says the best suggestionists are those who have acquired the suggestive manner. So now we've taken it to a degree of love, suggestive manner, truth of how you actually are. And he says, which is developed by the exercise of authoritative utterances and commands and physical appearances, manner, and tones arising. Those are effects of, from, he says, reflection of the mental state within. So that's what we do. We let go of the thinking patterns more so every day. Of who we are not, we become who we are, we maintain who we are, and it reflects automatically. No trying. Reflects automatically. You'll know what to say, when to say, why to say, how to say. You don't even have to think about those things. Body language, voice tonality, congruence, reflecting as others showing up to reveal our thinking patterns in relation to love and harmony within, in all its vivid accuracy. And this increases more so every day. So I trust you found this video to be helpful. Let's go ahead and conclude this with an auto-suggestion to further encourage. We could say, I recognize that I am the authority within, and I'm able to, as a result, identify the true and accurate thinking patterns of how I really am, and easily and in a fun, flow-based way let go of the thinking patterns of who I'm not to further reveal who I am, forming the habit in association and relationship with others, which further repeats itself as harmonious relationships, which further encourage how I truly am. Others show up how they truly are, and as the effect in personal life, business life, Others show up based on who they are, recognizing that the outer is a reflection of the inner. As I am within, so without. If you would like a copy of this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Today's Neville Goddard conversation builds further upon our last Sunday's video and relates over to the video I released a few days ago and ties into the concept of faith, mood, and attitudes of mind, also referred to as states of mind. We're going to discuss it from the understanding of the unseen as present fact, way of thinking. Now, we want this thinking to be automatic, so let's stimulate this discussion via a quote here from Neville, in which he states, "I take a look at my world, and I'm very restricted. Everything about me is something I would like to break through, transcend it, become a bigger person, a more secure person, where I'm doing a greater job in the world. All these things I would like to do, but reason tells me I'm not doing it, and my senses confirm my reason. Now, is there something in me that is my true self that can do it? Yes, my imagination can do it. In my imagination, I go and prepare the state. I actually go into the state and fill that state with my own being, and view the world from that state. I don't think of it, I think from it. When I think from it, I'm actually preparing that state. Then, I return to where I left this, the outer man, and once more fuse with it, and we become one once again. Now I take him across a bridge of incidents, some series of events that takes me toward the thing that I've prepared. And I will take him with me and enter into the very state itself. He feeds now, literally, upon that state. One of the ways that we explain this process here is from a book called Blink by Malcolm Gladwell. And although I don't believe he had mentioned this particular term, but it is a term that that book references, which we use in psychology or philosophy, and it's called thin slicing. Thin slicing. We're going to tie this into the journey realizing that vision, which we would call, as he refers to here, the bridge of incidents, a series of events. Now, as we discussed in the last Neville Goddard conversation, that there are known factors or known ways to bring forth a result, a success, and so forth, a vision. We also, as a result of working with this information, primarily the Neville Goddard information, are working with the unknown factors, those that we do not know yet. Now, one of the things that we like to do as human beings is we like to put labels on things in the mind so we can understand things, to conceptualize things, so that it makes our journey easier. These ideas that are being expressed are conceptual ideas, and the goal is to soften the blow, make it easier on the journey to realizing the vision. What we want to recognize that these are things that we actually already know. And these videos, these conversations, pose as a reminder. I believe that the idea of faith which is loyalty to the unseen reality of your vision. And as he refers to thinking from the state, which is one with a vision, which is related to what you saw in the end when you did the imaginal scene, is related on the journey as what I've titled this mind map here, the unseen as present fact. And it is revealed by our thinking, our behaviors, and how we go about relating with people, environment, circumstance, and information, as well as how people, environment, circumstance, and information relate to us. Now, one of the conceptual aspects was discussed in the book Blink by Malcolm Gladwell, and I want to bring some awareness onto this idea, this concept. It's called thin slicing. This is something that is going to be very apparent as we integrate what we talked about in Thursday's video, which is allowing to express creatively so in your entrepreneurial endeavor, in your artistic expression. We've been referring to this as some way, somehow, or, as he says here, the bridge of incidents, some series of events that takes me towards the thing that I have prepared, bringing your vision into reality. Now, this concept, thin slicing, is a term used in psychology and philosophy, and it describes the inherent ability that we have to find patterns in events based on only narrow windows of appearance, only a small amount of stimulus from the five sensory world. We call this also tapping into intuition. The term refers to the process of making very quick decisions from that state. And from the minimal information that is being presented, we're able to form conclusions, automatically so, deciding what course to take. And what we find is that this kind of decision, this accurate, precise decision making as a result of minimal data, inputs, can be as accurate, and a lot of times, especially when we work with this information here, we realize a lot more so accurate than trying to sit down and consume large volumes of information and trying to control every aspect or a lot of the aspects of the journey to realizing the vision. Now, in books like Letting Go by David Hawkins, Power versus Force, we refer to this as surrender. Surrendering to the state, allowing. Now, this is a attitude of mind. Now, when we look at attitude, attitude is defined as a settled way of thinking or feeling about someone or something. Typically one that is reflected in a person's behavior, in how we emotionally integrate as well. So, for example, I had a conversation yesterday with one of my clients who actually stimulated this video. He asked me about my trip last week, where I went up north snowboarding, and I actually decided to stay working from up north so I could get in some more snowboarding in the evening. And he says, how do I parallel that and relate that over to creativity and inspiration in what I do, these videos, in business, in consulting, and so forth? How does it help me draw the inspiration and creativity, as I had mentioned a number of times to him? And I believe it relates to the reminder of this concept here, the thin slicing. Some way, somehow, you'll get to the end. So when you go up the lift, you imagine yourself going down the pathways or the slopes. And you might even remember some bumps, and you consider, oh, I'm going to carve around this and do this jump, and so forth. And you do it from a place of ease. And what you notice is that when you jump on the slope, intuitively slow, you're not even thinking. You're allowing yourself to express as you go down the slope all the way to the end. And yeah, there might be some challenges, but one of the things that parallels going down the slopes and the bridge of incidents in relation to the entrepreneurial journey, in relation to any bridge of incidents leading to any vision, is the surrender, the trusting, and the allowing to facilitate one of the known factors. There's unknown factors as well, but we're talking about today a known factor, thin slicing. So it's this attitude of mind that is developed with practice, through repetition. This is why we always say, experience is one of the greatest teachers. The more we live this philosophy and practice it more so every day by picking a goal and allowing ourselves to release from unnecessary, convoluted, doubt-based interpretations and thinking in relation to who we are, the journey and the destination, we actually find ourselves automatically representing the unseen as present fact, intuitively so, as our body moves accordingly and things change in ways that we might not know. Thus is the power of the subconscious mind. Most of us, as far as our expression goes, is subconscious, yes? We can have a conscious understanding upon reverse engineering, connecting the dots looking backwards. But when we're working with a vision that perhaps is something that we have no experience in, what we want to do is tap into the idea of faith, which is loyalty to the unseen reality. So I recommend looking this up, thin slicing. Recognize that this is a term that has become more accepted nowadays than ever before. And certainly there was a book written upon it, not even recently, Blink by Malcolm Gladwell, that refers to this. And what I would suggest is that we identify with the idea, which is true, that we all have this ability within ourselves, and we're able to allow it to be so in our creative expressions and the day-to-day journey. Now, Neville Goddard refers to the relationship of the subconscious here in this quote, where he says, "Our mental scientists, psychiatrists, and psychologists of today refer to this region as the creative power in man. That everything in man's world is determined by the activities of the subconscious mind. That man himself has absolutely no control over the activities of this region unless he first gets into a relationship with it." So that's the power of imagining, visualization, in relation to what we just talked about in the earlier part of this video, which is, and we go back to it again, in my imagination, I go and I prepare the state. I actually go into the state and fill that state with my own being and view the world from that state. So just as I see myself going down the hill, I also see myself prior to putting together this content, prior to having conversations with the clients, prior to doing any business activity, which I had learned this through Think and Grow Rich over the journey, is to see myself already successful at the end, after that activity has been complete, in the now, to enter the mood, as we talked about in the last video, the state of mind, and to operate from that premise to allow more of the unknown factors, which we're looking to discover more so every day. And certainly I recommend the works of William Walker Atkinson and perhaps some of the more esoteric information to understand what unknown factors are. And some of the known factors, like, for example, thin slicing, all of these things are worked with. And as mentioned, we like to put labels and categories so we can understand things conceptually in the mind, and that helps us be more at ease so we know what's going on within, so we don't try to overly control what's going on outside, but rather allow the expression to happen via the subconscious mind as these things get facilitated. So he says, "For here is a region that they call the subconscious. Others call it the unconscious. and still others speak of it as the collective unconscious. But they claim for it a creative power that molds the world in harmony with the inner garment of itself. So they give it structure, they give it reality, they give it form, and they claim its structure determines the outer structure we observe and call the only reality. That any modification in the internal structure of this deep region results in corresponding changes in the outer objective world. But then they leave us at the mercy of it unless we can find a trick of entering into a relationship with it. The truth is that we already have a relationship with it. If we look at the expression of the outer world, and what is suggested here is that this is a expression, reflection, a birth of the subconscious mind, then we already have the ability to do this. What we're deciding to do is to do this more consciously, to imagine, to think, and to identify with what we're imagining and what we're thinking, because that's the key word, identifying with what we dwell in, so that we can express and experience reality from those perspectives. So again, he says it really well here in this quote. He says, "Knowing New York City quite well, I would assume I am stranded in a most familiar part of New York, and let it surround me. I must be in it, and then think of San Francisco. I must now see it 3,000 miles to the west of me, as I now see New York City 3,000 miles to the east of me. If I go into that state and dwell in it and make it natural, though I remain in it only for a while, a minute or so," and we're talking about saturating, impressing, fusing with the image in the subconscious mind, "then I open my eyes, I am shocked to find that I'm still here. I came back here. I have done it. I've entered into the state of my desire, and I will move across a bridge of incidents, a series of events, that will lead me and compel me to take a journey to New York City." So, even though the five senses says you're in another place, but meanwhile in your imagination, you're in another place, what is then happening is the unfoldment, or, as we say, the rearrangement, which happens through known ways and unknown ways. Things that you know you have to do, things that happen on their own. People seem to show up, a hunch or inspiration, which is why I recommend having an artistic expression, music, arts, communication, or any kind of expression where you abandon a persona that is very restrictive, that is not really who you are, because the reality is restrictive, is based on overly identifying with certain indecision, fear, doubt, insecurity-based thinking, to the level where we identify with that self-image. And so it seems very restrictive. Now, the abandonment of that self-image happens automatically when we enter that state. We'll notice it. He calls this the feeling of the wish fulfilled, or as we talked about in the last video, entering the mood. Now he says, now this I've used only as a spatial example. You can take it in a financial sense, take it in the social world, take it in any way whatsoever. That is what came to me a few days ago before I closed. For if I could find something more simple to tell them, then I think I would have told them. This would be it. To enter into the state and not simply think of the state. Thinking from it differs from thinking of it. I must learn to think from it Well, let's go back to our definition here of thin slicing. When we're able to look at a very minimal amount of five sensory data, and whatever it is that we're looking at or experiencing, we're interpreting it from the perspective of some way, somehow, this is in contribution to the vision, and you might actually know how it is. We call that a sign or a synchronicity. Or, if we want to take away those labels, we can look at it as the unseen as present fact. Because mind weaves a journey to the destination, even though all things exist now. As we've been realizing, creation is complete. And we select in our imagination where we desire to be, and we allow the bridge of incidents to unfold to bring us there. And it could be a combination of yin and yang, wu wei, doing and not doing, knowing when to act and when not to act, when to allow, when to take a step forward. All that happens in flow, again, which is why I like that he brought up the snowboarding reference, because such is the case in the entrepreneurial journey. Working with this concept of thin slicing, we get a little bit of information. Somebody presents an idea right then and there, because you are in that state of mind, the one that's reflective of the vision. You know right there, intuitively so, if it's the right opportunity for you or not. It's the one that you want to move forward with or not. You feel it. You don't even have to think about it. You intuitively know it. That would be referencing a faithful person, someone that is faithful and loyal to the vision, because they know in the moment. That's a person that's living in faith, loyalty to the unseen reality, which is the unseen as present fact, which represents itself in knowing in the moment. So what if we're confused? What if we are overthinking? What if we're stressed and frustrated? These are identifications of different states of mind that are not in harmony with the vision. So we go back to what brings us into the mood. And what I recommend is watching the video I released on Thursday, because I gave 7 ways of how I enter back into that mood, as he refers to enter into the state and not simply thinking of the state. Thinking from it differs from thinking of it. I must learn to think from it. So as mentioned, this is a reality screen of space mirror that we are reflecting upon based on the contents from within. That's what this world is. So, it's going to continuously re-impress on the subconscious mind what we identify with here, based on our interpretation. So are we interpreting reality from the perspective of the vision, the unseen reality, or some kind of interpretation which we would call doubt, indecision, insecurity, and so forth? As we continue to identify with, let's say, those kinds of thinkings which are not in harmony with the vision, do not represent loyalty to the unseen reality, we continue to encourage those perspectives from representing itself again on the screen of space, because the subconscious mind accepts the instructions and expresses. What we want is to allow the expression through the behaviors and through reality changing in both the known and unknown ways, to reflect the vision, perhaps some vision more so every day. Bridge of incidents may be a day, right away, or over the course of days, weeks, months. As we allow it to express what we see on the screen of space, to further encourage maintaining a state of mind in which we can experience more of what I'm referring to here, where we say thin slicing,